Hi, Garrett. Today I'm going to ask you a series of questions. My expectation is for you to simply answer to the best of your ability. Whenever you're ready, we can get started. How does that sound?
Sounds good.
Alrighty, so question one I have for you is, can you tell me some of the different types of cables you have used in the telecommunications industry?
Yeah, for sure. So when I was in the military, I was a lineman, and we worked with many different cables, a lot of them being Cat5 or Cat6, zip cord, which is fiber optic cabling, both multi-mode and single mode, T-FOCA, which is fiber optic cable, but it's ruggedized, so it's meant for the outdoors. And I also worked with different types of coax cables, such as RJ6 and Heliax cable.
Very good, that's a long list. Alright, so the next question I have for you is, where have you received your training as a lineman?
I received all my training as a lineman with the Canadian Armed Forces. So it started in 2016. I was enrolled at CIFC, so it's the Canadian Armed Forces School of Communications and Electronics. That's where I did my first phase of the line course in the Army. So it's called your DP 1.1. So that covered pole rescue, tower rescue, fiber splicing, copper splicing, termination, installation, and grounding, to name a few. And then after I completed that, I went to my unit, and then I ended up coming back a couple months later to CIFC, and I completed phase 2 of the lineman course, which is DP 2.1, and that entails more of a leadership, emphasis on leadership. So that'd be kind of like a crew foreman. So that also entailed doing power line, like the telephone lines, like the bays, installing the cables onto like strand, building a tower, replacing poles and replacing the old with new ones.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, I received all my training at CIFC in Kingston.
Very good. All right, so question 3 is, specific to you, what are your workplace skills?
My workplace skills, I would have to say personally, are keeping the worksite clean and organized, along with keeping my tools clean and organized in a functioning capability. And the big thing, it all revolves around safety. If your worksite's clean and tidy, you're not going to be tripping over your tools, your ropes, the materials. And the same with your tools. Like, as long as they're clean and operable, no one's going to get hurt if something fails because, your tools are dirty and caked with mud and stuff like that. So for me, the big thing is keeping worksite clean, tools clean, to kind of feed towards a bigger picture of worksite safety.
Okay. Another question's personal in a way. What made you interested in and eventually led to you joining the line trade?
For me, what really kind of piqued my interest was when I got into Canadian Armed Forces, I was on what we call like PAT platoon, so I was waiting for a long time before I received any training. Mm-hmm. So I requested OJT, on-the-job training, in Petawawa, and when I was there, I was attached with Canadian Armed Forces linemen, and that's where I got exposed to what they did as a trade and just kind of the culture and the people, what they were like. So that was awesome, but while I was there, I got to do some climbing. I got to climb poles, I got to climb some towers, and that was really eye-opening for me because I'd never done that civvy side. Mm-hmm. So for me, that was what really was kind of the driving force to me becoming a lineman, which was, the climbing aspect, because there's not a lot of trades in the military that let you climb towers or telephone poles. So for me, that was the big thing. And then also the community, like, it's a very small trade in the military. So it's not uncommon for people to know people from coast to coast, like you know of people. It's a very tight-knit community. So for me, the tight-knit community, also with the ability to climb, was what made me pursue the line trade.
Sounds like your PAT platoon waiting period was a blessing in disguise.
Kind of was, yeah.
All right. So my final question for you is, tell me one event and situation where your line trade skills were put to the test, and when they were put to the test, how did you overcome them?
I'd say this is kind of a two-part answer. One part, for me, one of the big ones was I got to do a really big job here where I live in Shiloh for the range control. They were upgrading their communication systems to this. It's called Sears. It's pretty complicated, but to make a long story short, I was in charge of replacing all the old antenna systems, so removing it from the tower in a safe manner, and then raising up new antennas, and including removing the old cabling and then replacing the new cabling. So my job was to make sure that, again, the work site was safe, clean, organized, and then also that everyone on the ground crew, knew what was going on with the climbers at all times. Because when you're 100 feet high, I'm sure as you know, it's hard to communicate unless you have radios, which we didn't have. So the big emphasis was on everyone being in the loop of like, okay, the different steps. So that really was kind of put me to the test to think like 2, 3, 4 steps ahead. The other thing too for part 2 would be more when I was in the field. When I got deployed to Wainwright for exercises, we are always challenged with where to put our cables that aren't going to be destroyed by the armored vehicles. So the big one is always, do we bury it or do we put it up in the air? And each one has its pros and cons, but it kind of came down to a last minute decision, and in the end we went with my decision of burying the cable because it provided us with there was less danger involved, so people could you didn't have to worry about climbing, we didn't have to worry about people falling from climbing, and being able to bury it provided us with an ease of retrieving our cable because we reuse the cable when we're in the field. So for that was pretty challenging as well because we kind of had to butt heads a little bit with one of my coworkers, but in the end we both came to an agreement. So that it doesn't sound like it really put my skills to the test, but it did, because being in the Army, you have to learn how to think kind of in a snap, and also your judgment, and again also being able to think like 2, 3 steps ahead, like, okay, well, how many people are going to be coming through here, what vehicles, the weight of the vehicles, how far to bury your cables, stuff like that. So that would be my 2 big events that kind of put my line skills to the test.
Very good. So I got a 2-in-1 answer. That's awesome. All right, so I think that's everything that I have here for today. Thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you for your time.